In this video, we'll show you how to diagnose and replace a defrost thermostat. The defrost thermostat, what it does is actually senses how cold the inside of the unit is getting, senses if it's frosting up, and if it does frost up, what it does actually shuts off the compressor. The blower continues to run. That's what melts the ice off the unit or the frost off the unit. Couple symptoms of a bad defrost thermostat would be the unit actually either not producing any water, or actually you might actually get some freezing or condensating on the outside of the unit. That's if the defrost is bad, it could let that frost build up. So the way to diagnose it, we'll actually have to take the front cover off and actually run the unit to see if the defrost thermostat actually turns on and off like it should. So first thing to do is you want to make sure that your unit's unplugged. I have the end of the cord here, so we know the unit's unplugged. The next thing we'll do is actually take the front cover off so we can gain access to the defrost thermostat. We also can see on the inside of the unit to see where the unit's actually frosting up. So we have 6 Phillips head screws here. We'll use a drill here to take it off. All right, 6 Phillips head screws off. Now we want to locate the defrost thermostat. You can actually see all this copper tubing up here. We got the insulated copper tubing. The defrost thermostats is actually this little round piece with a clip on it. And this is how it'll come brand new. So it'll be coiled up like that. Defrost thermostat. We have a little clip here that actually clips around it to hold it onto the copper tubing. Some of the units will actually have a piece of foam kind of wrapped around the defrost thermostat or whatnot. We'll just have to remove that. There's no need to put it back on. The next step would be we actually want to turn the unit on and actually see this copper tubing freeze up or whatnot. We want to make sure the defrost thermostat will actually catch the frost and turn the compressor off for us like it should. So the first thing to do is we want to go ahead and plug the unit in, but before we do that, we want to make sure our controls are in the off position. So here on the side here, we want to make sure our fan is in the auto position. We want to make sure our demostat here is in a counterclockwise position to the off position. So we have a power outlet here. I may want to plug in a light or a fan or whatnot, and make sure you verify power to your power outlet. Then go here, we'll plug it in. What we want to do here to get the defrost thermostat to act correctly, or get the refrigeration system to act correctly, we need airflow to go through the unit correctly. With having the front cover off, the unit doesn't work correctly as opposed to airflow. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the front cover, we're going to lay it sideways, label side in, across the bottom of the unit. This will let the airflow go through the unit correctly, so we'll actually get a frost pattern on our copper tubing. So the next step would be to just turn the demostat to the on position. You can verify the compressor and fan comes on. What we're actually going to be looking for here is this big copper tube. It's called the accumulator. It'll actually start to get cold. Within about 5 minutes, we'll notice that this tube actually starts to get frosty. It starts to get a little white on it. And then the compressor will actually shut down, the blower will continue to run. So we want to verify that happens to make sure the defrost thermostat is working correctly. You can actually see some of the frost coming up here, frost on this tube. The compressor actually did shut down, so we know that this defrost thermostat's actually okay. If we had a problem, the unit would have ran longer than 5 minutes, probably 10-15 minutes. You would have seen heavy frosting. Possibly if you were actually having problems when you took the front cover off, you may have noticed that there was like a heavy block of ice, like an inch layer thick of ice. You might have seen some ice on this stainless steel panel behind here. Might have seen some really thick pieces of ice back there. This happens very rarely, but if the defrost thermostat here is not clipped to the copper line, just laying in the drain pan, it can't sense how cold this line is, and that'll cause some problems also. What we would do for further testing is generally in about 15 minutes or so, the unit should warm up enough to turn the compressor back on. Then we would know that Defrost Thermostat's actually kicking the compressor back on. So that would be a full test for it. But generally, if you have a bad one, you see a lot of frost or whatnot built up behind here when you take the front cover off initially. But in this case, this defrost thermostat is actually okay, and you can actually go ahead and put the unit back together. To replace the defrost thermostat on a Santa Fe Classic, you'll need the following tools. First off, you'll need a 5/16 screwdriver or a 5/16 hex drill bit, a number 2 Phillips screwdriver, or a number 2 drill bit Phillips, a drill if you're going to use a drill, a common flathead screwdriver, a pair of slip joint pliers, needle nose pliers work great here also, a pair of side cutters or wire cutters. Also you'll need a 1/4-inch ratchet with a 5/16 hex socket. Now that you've either diagnosed that the defrost thermostat is faulty, the next step would be to replace it. From the testing procedure, you've had the front cover off or whatnot, you can go ahead and turn the humidity control off, and then you can take the front panel off and away. We don't want to work on the unit when it has power to it, so we'll go ahead and actually unplug the unit here so we're okay and safe. First couple of steps would actually be to take the defrost thermostat off. As I mentioned before, the defrost thermostat might actually have some of this insulation wrapped around it. You can just kind of peel that off. You don't need it to replace it. It doesn't have to go back on. So the first step would be to take this little metal clip off. It's pretty easy. If you take a pair of pliers, you just grab one side of it and you kind of pop it up. It'll pop right off. There's these 2 little hooks here that hook around the defrost thermostat to hold it in place. The next step would be to remove the defrost thermostat wires. We have to get them undone here. There are a couple zip ties here that hold them in place. So go in here and just cut the zip ties. Want to make sure you don't cut the wires. Then you can see there's 2 black wires coming from the defrost thermostat. One goes to the compressor, and the other one actually goes inside the dehumidifier into the control box here. What you would want to do is to get to the control box to start out with. We have 2 grommets here, one on the back side, one on the outside of the unit here. Pair of slip joint pliers again. What you would do is actually just pinch the grommet, and that'll make it smaller so it can come out of the panel. So it's kind of a 2-part grommet, so you squeeze the 2 parts together and it'll pull out of the panel. And then we have the one on the outside here, kind of same thing. Just kind of go in there and pinch the grommet. Then to get the control box out, there's actually 4 5/16 hex screws on the outside, just above and below the control here. Go ahead and take those out. What we want to do is actually follow that one wire, black wire here that goes through the control box hole. Should come up and actually go to the humidity control. Pull that off. It's actually attached to the orange wire on a what we call a piggyback spade. I want to just kind of work that wire off of that piggyback spade here, and then we have the other side of the wire, and then you can actually just pull it up and out of the control box. So we have one side of the wire, and then the last wire you have to get to is the wire going to the compressor. You'll need a, generally works best, just a 1/4-inch ratchet with a 5/16 socket. There's a little nut on top of the compressor. And we'll just have to loosen that so we can get the compressor open. And we got the nut. And then you should be able to pull the cap up and out. I'm going to remove the black wire. I'm going to take this out a little differently so you can see it. This round piece I have in my hand is a compressor overload with this brown wire. The black wire from the defrost thermostat actually connects to it. So that's the wire that you're actually after. So remove that. I'll go ahead and place this overload back on the compressor. Now that you have both black wires free, they have these little spade connectors on the end of the wire. Those won't actually fit up through the drain pan here. There's a little black grommet that if you kind of squeeze with your hands, you can push it out the bottom, and that'll open it up a little bit more so you can get these spade connectors through. So a little black grommet that looks like that. You just kind of pull the wires up and through, work the spade connectors out. Now we have the defrost thermostat out. That's the old one. The new one should look the same. Sometimes the old one that you pull out will be a little bit smaller and have kind of like a bluish gray dot instead of this red dot there. But this style is the correct one. And then the new defrost thermostat comes kind of coiled up like this. Usually has a little bit longer wires than the original, just for the replacement. So we'll take, again, those connectors at the end, put them through the drain pan on the top. And then that grommet from before actually has a little slit in it that you can slide it over the wires. And then you can push it up through the drain pan to snap it back in place. And then what you want to do is the defrost thermostat has this little indentation in it that actually conforms with the copper tubing here. So we want to place that right on the copper tubing here. Generally it's in this area. Where it comes off from before, that's exactly where you want to place it. The clip here actually has two little notches on either end. There's a little groove in the defrost thermostat. You can get one groove started and then push and snap it over into the other groove. And now the defrost thermostat is connected to the copper tube. Then you have the other two black wires here. Usually it's best to kind of put them behind this insulated copper tube here just for proper routing. So it doesn't matter which wire goes to which, just as long as they're both connected. First wire will go to the compressor or compressor overload spade that we took off before. So we can kind of route it behind here, and then we'll push it down onto the spade. Got our compressor cap. What you want to remember here is the cap has this little channel here where the wire should run underneath. So when you place it down onto the compressor, you want to make sure all the wires are routed nice and tight through there. Use that 5/16 nut again, put it on top of the compressor. All right, and then we'll use our 1/4-inch ratchet with the 5/16 hex socket on it. And then we'll just go ahead and tighten this down. It just needs to be snug. It's just a plastic cap. Doesn't have to be super tight. And then we have the other side of our defrost thermostat. We'll run it through the control box. Pull it up and through here. And then we're going to connect it to that piggyback spade on that orange wire here as before. Push it down nice and tight on there. And then that other connector on that orange wire will clip onto the defrost thermostat. Now that you got both wires connected, we can start somewhat reassembling the control box here. So what you want to do is the compressor capacitor up at the top. This one's black, other ones are silver, but it should be at the top. The little wire where all the wires go, a little hole in the control box where all the wires go through should be towards the bottom. Our 5/16 hex screws. I'll install those into the unit. Generally I put these in just a little bit, and I go back and check to make sure none of the wires fell out of the control box. When you tighten these down, they'll actually pinch the wires, so we want to make sure of that. So I just kind of run my hand around, make sure I don't feel any wires coming out. We'll take our screw gun again and tighten everything down. Then you want to take your cord grommets here, strain relief bushings. Reinstall those on the cord here. There should be a little indentation where the small side of the grommet actually put a little indentation in there, a little witness mark. We want to try to return that to the same place. That'll make it a little bit easier for you. So we'll put it in, put it around, take our slip joint pliers again, kind of smash it down, and then kind of push it into the unit there. And then we have the last grommet there on the back side here. So we have that. This one usually is a little bit easier. Usually you can just kind of push it in by hand. So now that we have that in place, all the parts are in place, we just need to make sure the wires get zip tied in place so they don't rub or hang anywhere. But generally, just kind of make a nice little ball of wires here. Kind of put a zip tie on one side and then kind of on the other side. Try to get as much wires underneath the zip ties as possible. Zip tie them, take your cutters again, and just snip off the excess. That's an installed defrost thermostat. Next step would be to install the front cover. As before, there's 4 metal clips here that you want to be mindful of. You want to make sure those are in the right, actually in their spot. A lot of times when you take the front cover off, they'll actually fall down to the bottom or in the drain pan here, so you just want to recover those. If they're loose or wanting to fall down, you can just take a pair of pliers and just kind of crimp the back end of them, a little bend of them a little bit, and that'll collapse them a little bit. That'll give them a little bit more tension to fit back on the flange. That'll save you a little bit of trouble, a little headache when you're putting the front cover back on. So you have your 6 Phillips head screws, you got your drill or screwdriver with your Phillips bit. Take the front cover here. You want to kind of place that piece in the top first and then kind of push it down on the bottom there. Then we'll lightly start all 6 screws. And once you have them all started, then you go ahead and tighten them down. These are small screws, don't need to be too tight, just snug will work.